Imagine this. You're just trying to live your best life in 19th century China, minding your own business. Maybe you're a farmer, tilling your rice paddies. Maybe you're a scholar, trying to write some really deep poetry. Life's pretty good, right? Then some Europeans show up, not exactly asking nicely, and decide that what your country really needs is a whole lot of this weird, smokable plant that kind of makes people forget to, do things. And suddenly, your poetry gets way less deep, and your rice paddies are looking a little neglected. These were one of the many effects of Western imperialism in China, and I'll give you some more detail now. Western imperialism in China was introduced primarily during the 19th century and involved European powers like Britain, France, and Germany, and other nations like Russia and Japan exerting control over China through economic and political influence. Using gunboat diplomacy, they forced China into unequal treaties, establishing spheres of influence. Britain wanted access to Chinese markets, especially tea, which led to the Opium Wars, where they forced China to open ports and allow the import of opium. Western imperialism in China, primarily during the 19th and early 20th centuries, was driven by a combination of economic interests, political ambitions, and a desire to exert influence over a vast and seemingly weak empire. European powers, particularly Britain, faced a trade imbalance with China, where they wanted to trade their stuff for large quantities of tea, silk, and porcelain. But China didn't want any of Britain's stuff. And there would be a trade imbalance with how much silver Britain would need to pay. So Britain thought of a solution.
I've got it! We'll trade them something heavily addictive so that they can't stop ever wanting it! Unlimited goods from China!
Dude, that's messed up.
Oh, I'm a genius!
Want opium instead of silver?
No, not really. Okay, it was a little more complicated than that, but you get the gist of it. Basically, Britain forced China to open ports to import opium for trade. And as I showed you already, opium was not very good for China because it was destroying their culture and their economy as a whole, which led to the First Opium War. In short, China outlawed opium, recognizing its detrimental effects on society and the economy, as it was causing widespread addiction and draining silver from the country. So, the Chinese made efforts to suppress the opium trade, and Britain viewed China's actions as an attack on free trade and a threat to their economic interests. And so the British government sent a naval expedition to China, initiating the First Opium War. Here's how it went. As you can see, the Chinese look like they're at a disadvantage here in terms of a navy. That's because they are. As you can guess, the British absolutely crushed them in the First War. Exhibit A. Yeah, they did not stand a chance. The Second Opium War. Yes, there is a Second Opium War. I wish there wasn't one too. I have to write more about it, so Basically, the reason the Second Opium War exists is because between the First and Second Opium Wars, the Treaty of Nanking was signed, granting Britain various concessions to China, including compensation and the cession of Hong Kong Island. This treaty, however, failed to fully satisfy British goals of improved trade and diplomatic relations, leading to the Second Opium War. It was actually a lot more complicated than just that, but I'm going to only summarize it and discuss key points to keep this video short. Anyway, after 4 years of fighting, along with the French's help, Britain defeated China. And so, the Treaty of Tianjin was signed. The Treaty of Tianjin was not one treaty, but several treaties, and they were called a series of unequal treaties, signed in 1858 between China, the Qing dynasty, and several Western powers, Britain, France, Russia, and the United States, after China's defeat in the Second Opium War. In essence, these treaties forced China to open more ports for foreign trade, allow foreign legalization/embassies in Beijing, permit Christian missionaries to travel and preach throughout China, grant foreigners the right to travel and conduct business in the Chinese interior, legalize the import of opium, pay large indemnities, financial compensation to Britain and France, and finally reduce tariffs on important goods, making Western goods cheaper in China. You can see why they were called the unequal treaties. The overall effects. Hong Kong was given to Britain after the loss of the First Opium War, making Hong Kong a British country. Another effect was the Century of Humiliation. The Opium Wars are widely seen as the beginning of China's Century of Humiliation, roughly beginning around 1839 and ending around 1949, a period characterized by repeated foreign aggression, unequal treaties, loss of territory, and a general sense of national subjugation. This period deeply impacted Chinese national identity and fueled later nationalist movements. The Opium Wars also contributed to the fall of the Qing dynasty, and the Chinese Republic was established shortly thereafter but was taken over by communism. Deeper impacts. The opium trade contributed to economic instability within China, leading to widespread addiction, reduced agricultural production, and weakened the Chinese economy, further contributing to the conditions that favored communism, creating an environment ripe for socialist and communist ideas to take hold. The communist movement in China, led by Mao Zedong, capitalized on the widespread discontent with existing order and promised a radical solution to China's problems. So, in summary, the Opium Wars were two wars fought mainly between Britain and China over opium imports. It resulted in China losing control over its tariffs, ceded territory like Hong Kong to Britain, opium being a legalized trade, and a century of humiliation for China. The Opium Wars also contributed a strong sense of nationalism in China, the fall of the Qing dynasty, leading to China eventually becoming a communist country, and distrust of Western powers. And that's the end of my history project. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. My sources are linked below, and here are the credits. And communist ideas to take hold. The communism, which led to widespread addiction, reduced agricultural production, all referring to how, and that's it for bloopers. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end.